Years ago, there was a road that was known by the locals as the Never-Ending Road. Some say it was in California, while others maintain that it was in Alberta, Canada. It was a long, winding road, unlit and bordered by a thick forest that led through the mountains. According to legend, many people who drove down the road at night were never seen or heard from again. The legend of the Never-Ending Road became so well known that a lot of folks were even afraid to drive on it during daylight hours. Some drivers would even lose their nerve and turn back, terrified that if they continued along the road, they would never return. The road took a sharp turn at one point and curved around a large canyon. There were no guardrails on the turn, and on the other side of the canyon, the road continued. One summer, a work crew was widening the road where they made a gruesome discovery. One of the workmen pushed over a rock on the side of the canyon and heard it hit something metal. When they climbed down to look, the workmen found dozens of crashed cars at the bottom. They had all fallen victim to their doom, and the decomposing bodies and skeletal remains of the victims were still strapped into their seats. It was discovered that the roads on either side of the canyon lined up so well that when viewed from the correct angle, especially at night, it created an optical illusion. The canyon was almost invisible, and the road seemed to continue on up and over the hill on the other side of the canyon. People who drove down the road at night had no idea that there was a huge drop in front of them until it was too late, and they careened off the cliff and plummeted to their deaths. They say that local law enforcement hushed up the discovery, wanting to avoid a scandal, and the road was quietly closed down, never to be reopened. The corpses of the dead were never able to be recovered, and they still lie there to this day, in their twisted metal graves. There was a woman who went to Mexico on vacation. She got bored of hanging around the resort hotel and decided to explore the town. After doing a little shopping and buying a few souvenirs, she happened to see a little dog trotting down a dusty alley between two buildings. She was immediately smitten with the cute little animal and followed it. When she caught up to the dog, she picked it up and it started licking her face. The dog didn't have any collar or tags, so she assumed it was a stray. The animal was so adorable that she decided to adopt it. It's illegal to transport animals back from Mexico to the United States, so on the journey back home, she hid the little dog under her sweater and pretended that she was pregnant. The guards at the border crossing never suspected a thing. Back in the United States, she brought her new pet back to her apartment and gave it a bath. Then she set out a bowl of food for the little dog to eat. She laid out a blanket in the kitchen for the creature to sleep on, and then went out to a restaurant to have dinner. When she came home a few hours later and walked into the kitchen, she found her new pet chewing a hole through the wall. There was an oozing mucus around the animal's eyes, and it was foaming at the mouth. Afraid that her new pet might be sick, she wrapped it up in a blanket and let it sleep in her bedroom. The next morning, the woman woke up to find the creature gnawing on her ear. She screamed and pushed it away. The woman realized that her new pet was seriously ill and took it to the vet. She sat impatiently in his office, waiting for him to see her. As soon as the vet came out, the woman rushed over, carrying her pet in her arms. "There's something wrong with my dog," she said. He took one look at it and asked, "What did you say this was?" "I'm not sure what breed it is," she replied. "I think it's some kind of rare Mexican breed." The vet shook his head. "This is not a dog," he said. "This is a sewer rat." The woman was horrified. "A sewer rat?" she cried. "Yes," said the vet, "but the bad news is, it has rabies." One night, a teenage girl went to a nightclub with her friends. They had a great time, drinking and dancing, and it was 3 a.m. by the time they left. Her friends lived in the city, but the girl lived in the suburbs. They said goodbye and went back to their apartment, leaving the girl to make her own way home. Unable to get a taxi, the teenage girl decided to walk home on her own. On the way, she had to cross through a park. It was very dark, and all she could hear was the clanking of her heels echoing in the night. She thought she saw something move in the bushes, so she quickened her pace. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind a bush and blocked her path. His face was hideous. It looked terribly scarred and misshapen. She tried to run, but he cornered her and grabbed hold of her arms. The frightened girl pleaded for her life and tearfully asked to be let go. The man's deformed mouth twisted into a leering grin. "Do you want death or smiley face?" he asked. "Please, just let me go," she cried. "Death or smiley face?" he insisted. The girl didn't know what he meant. "Smiley face," she replied. Without a word, he pulled out his knife and sliced the corners of the girl's mouth up to her ears. Her face was left completely deformed. She was scarred for life. When other people saw her in public, they said she resembled a grotesque smiley face. There was a woman who bought a pet snake. It was a 12-foot-long Burmese python. She lived alone in a small house with her young son and kept the snake in a tank in the living room. The pet snake had a habit of escaping from its tank. After a while, the woman began to feel guilty about keeping such a large reptile in such a small, confined space. She would often take the snake out of its tank and allow it to roam freely about the house. Her little son loved the pet snake and often brought it out to the garden to play with it. One morning, the woman noticed that the pet snake had stopped eating. 3 days passed and the snake still hadn't touched any of its food. The woman began to get worried that there was something wrong with the snake, so she picked it up the phone and called the vet. "Is it normal for a snake to suddenly stop eating?" she asked. "It depends," said the vet. "In the wild, snakes often have to survive for long periods without food. Sometimes they starve themselves in preparation for a huge meal. Pet snakes can also get bored with what you're feeding them. They like a change of food now and again." The woman took the vet's advice and bought a new type of food for her pet, but the snake still refused to eat anything. Not long afterwards, the woman woke up in the middle of the night to find her pet snake lying in bed beside her. It was sleeping, stretched out completely straight on the bed. Thinking this was a little strange, she picked it up and put it back in the tank. A few days later, her son was playing with the snake in the garden. The woman was washing dishes in the kitchen when she happened to glance out the window. Her son was laying down on the grass. The snake was lying next to him, stretched out and stiff as a board. The woman became convinced that the snake was dying. She immediately grabbed the phone to call the vet again. "My pet snake still isn't eating," she said. "I don't think there's anything to worry about," replied the vet. "Just keep an eye on it, and if it isn't eating by the end of the month, bring it into my office." "There's something else," said the woman. "The other night I found it laying in bed beside me. It was stretched out straight and totally rigid." "Oh no," said the vet with alarm. "You'll have to get rid of the snake as soon as possible. It'll have to be put down." "Why? What's wrong with it?" asked the woman. "That's what snakes do when they're measuring you," he said. "Measuring me?" she asked. "It was sizing you up in order to eat you," he replied. The horrified woman turned and looked out the window just in time to see her little son's feet disappearing down the snake's throat. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.